Hello, everyone. My name is Luke John Louis, the host of the Deep Voice Man Show. Thank you for joining us today. Our guest is Ella Ivy, and she is a cosmic soul coach. And so we're very fortunate to have her here with us today. I guess to start off, can you talk to us about your background and how you first gravitated towards what you do now?
Sure. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast and inviting me into this experience. I'm really excited to share this conversation because I feel like a lot of us who, especially are entrepreneur minded, always have an origin story, right? And so my origin story, I've been in hospitality in the hospitality business pretty much my whole career. I started at Bennigan's back in 1994 to pay my way through college when I was going to USF, which I ended up finally graduating in 1997. And I was my degree is in mass communication with a minor in sociology. And I've always been fascinated with people. I think that's why I gravitated towards the restaurant business, because I just really loved working with people and hearing their stories, right? Because when you work in certain environments, you meet people from all over the world. And so I was with Bennigan's for 11 years, and then I just maintained being in the hospitality business. And back in 2003, I was going through what's called a dark night of the soul. Maybe you guys can relate, where I was going through just questioning my reality. I had just had my son, so I know part of that was postpartum depression that I had been feeling. Now that hindsight, I can go back and look and say, oh, this is what was happening hormonally. But it was also this pivot point after having my son about what is it that you want to do? What's going to make you happy? Because being in hospitality in the service business, it served its purpose, but I felt like that wasn't fully it. And so now being a new mom and just having this responsibility, I said, just things got more serious for me. Which, for those that follow astrology, if you understand the lingo, I was going through a Saturn return at that time, right? So Saturn, our planet of structure, our taskmaster, cycles through once every 29 years. So most of us, you can think back to when you were 29 years old, around that time period, that we're being asked to sort of grow up and develop a mastery of some sort. So being a new mother, I realized that, hospitality had a shelf life. I didn't want to be, a 60-year-old bartender. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I personally did not see that vision. I didn't feel like that's where I wanted my life to go. So because I was going through a dark night of the soul and having to really learn how to heal myself, because I wanted to be the best mom possible, I made an agreement with myself that if I'm going to be in this world, I'm going to be happy. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that level of peace and whatever that costs. So I happened to have a Natural Awakening magazine right next to me when I made that agreement with myself. And there were classes being offered on Reiki, on energy healing, astrology. So that began my deep dive into the metaphysical realm, to the energy healing practices, while simultaneously I was still bartending, right? So it was such a fascinating journey, having taking my first astrology class back in 2005 and getting to practice the archetypes, because I learned these things, right? I learned the glyphs and the symbols and what was going on with the chart. And then I'd go and practice it with the shift that I had that night, right? Just studying people and asking questions. And what's your birthday? I never wanted to ask what's your sign, but I always wanted to ask what's your birthday. And for astrology, it really is about pattern recognition, and that each of us have certain personality archetypes that when you start really looking into it, you see these patterns emerging with everything and everyone around you. And so I just started to really experiencing these synchronicities because I was looking through the lens of astrology on how to really decipher my reality. And astrology really encompasses everything. I call it the 5 pillars of wellness. Really, it's the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and financial realms. And there's 12 houses that represent these particular frequencies that every human has to experience, right? The 5 pillars, the 5 points of wellness. I think of like the star of Venus, which forms and makes a 5-pointed star in the sky. If you want to study that, check out the Venus star point. That's something to explore, especially if you're getting into that there's always a correspondence, right? Hermeticism, as above, so below, as within, so without. And so my journey has been very spiritually based, but it's been learning to anchor in the spiritual knowledge with how to navigate this physical reality. And so there's so much to it. There's, again, when you really start deep diving into these aspects and learning the language, it helps you decipher and really tune in to the energy around you in a very neutral way. It's like describing the color purple, right? You just learn this is the color purple, this is how it works, and this is, what the energy it emits. And that's what astrology has really been for me in my personal development, and as my leading into more entrepreneurship, because at certain points, for those that are entrepreneurial minded, you realize you can't really work for anybody anymore. You really want to, it's the mission to create something and to thrive and be successful, whatever success is for you. To me, it's being able to support yourself financially, have a house, a roof over your head, have, clothes on your back, and table fed, with what you're able to create on an individual level. So if you're drawn to this podcast and you're drawn to this type of conversation, I would just invite you to realize and recognize that it is a journey towards entrepreneurship. It's having you face your shadow self. It's having you face all your resistance to being successful, even your own inertia. It's having to change your mindset of showing up for somebody else as a boss and really showing up for yourself and what that looks like. So it's been quite a journey, and astrology has always been there to help guide me through these pivotal life changes, because again, I have that periphery and I can see the happenings around me through an astrological perspective, and it gave me peace that there is a system, there's a process to this whole thing. And I'm not alone in this process. So if I can deeply understand the processes at work, I can find more peace with it. And when there's roadblocks or certain things to overcome, I realize that's just me building a muscle. It's like when you go to the gym, right? You need resistance to strength train. And so it's about really learning to navigate the inner resistance to really have the life that you want to create for yourself. So I know that's probably a long answer to a very simple question, but that's what wanted to come through. So thanks for asking.
No worries. And thank you so much for sharing your origin story. Very inspiring. So my understanding is you worked in hospitality, and I get the sense you've always been a people person, right? Even before you started learning astrology. I was wondering if you were a waitress or whatnot. So you were a bartender for those 11 years, right? At Bennigan's?
Primarily bartending. I have waited tables. I've done many different events, from weddings to funerals to everything in between. So I have literally worked with thousands of people, just meeting people from all over the world, because my last job was actually a beach bar in Clearwater Beach. It was a very popular and successful beach bar. And so that was sort of my launching point to developing community, learning how people work, learning what drives people. The subtle nuances of human personality is just, to me, so intriguing. I've got, for those that follow astrology, my sun is in Scorpio, my moon is in Scorpio, and my rising ascendant is in Sagittarius. So if you guys speak the AstroLingo, that's what my configurations are. And so the sun is where you've come to shine, your moon is your mastery, your memory, and then your ascendant is what you've come to learn. So Sagittarius is sort of the wanderer, it's the archaeologist. It likes to dig through ancient truths and different ways of being, philosophies, religions. And so I was always fascinated, like, where do people come from? How learn to develop your belief system? What led you here? So I was always very inquisitive, and that made me also pretty successful as a bartender. And, because again, I like people. So yes, it really served me, and especially through looking at humanity through the astrological lens, because again, it gave me compassion to see what people were going through, because I had an understanding that, again, there is a system, there's a process, there's a pattern to being human. And when you can really tune into that pattern, then it gives you grace. And it gives you compassion for those that are going through their own pattern work or recognition. And then how it's more of a, like, how are we all very similar, and not so much how we are separate. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. And I could feel your passion. Mark Twain once said that everyone has two birthdays, the day they were born, the day they know why. And both your birthdays. And so, and I think what you're doing now is better than being a 60-year-old bartender.
It's funny that type of career, it wears on you. You can only do that physical. It's a very laborious job. It's hard work for those that have ever been in hospitality. It's not for the weak-hearted. So, but it has a time shelf. Everything to me has a timeline, and during that time period and space, I earned a really great living. I was a single mom, so I got to be able to structure my time to be there for my son. So I feel very grateful for that time in my life, because not only did it give me foundation for working with people, but it gave me the time and space to not only, be there with my son, but also learn these deeper esoteric philosophies that really are, to me, so important right now and coming into the collective field of what we're anchoring into. Because we're really opening up humanity is on a whole nother level of our spirituality, of our consciousness. We're not doing things the same way anymore. We can't do things the same way. And so what does that look like? Well, it's really connected to our spiritual essence, in my opinion, from just my own experiences, that we're not just here to be human doings. We're here to be human beings. But what does that really mean? What does that look like? And what does that feel like? And some of us never been able, because we've been in survival mode, right? To get to explore those aspects of self, because we've had to work 9 to 5 to pay the bills and to live, right? So this is a very interesting time to be alive, because I feel like we're all expanding and wanting to know more of our spiritual sides. But how do we do that? How do we support ourselves in the physical realms while we're expanding our spiritual nature, right? So this tends to be I guess the challenge, but also the opportunity.
Okay. And I'm not as familiar with astrology. I just know zodiac. I'm a Gemini. My mother's a Sagittarius. My older sister's an Aquarius. My father and younger sister are Cancers. And now I'm learning also about human design, which is also based on birthdays or whatever. So it's all very fascinating to me. And clearly, you're very knowledgeable about this subject. And obviously, you have that lived experience. You have a son, and you went through, my understanding, is, a postpartum thing, which is very common
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. And so thousands of people you've encountered. My goodness,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
But
It was my
but
training
so
ground.
yes, I would imagine. So with astrology, you had mentioned earlier, there's the 5 pillars. So it's this holistic and whatnot. So it's just all amazing to me. Now, I'm someone who's an aspiring life coach, and I'm curious where your thoughts are on the current state of coaching, and where do you see things going in the future, and yourself, obviously, in that future, particularly with the advent of AI.
Gosh, well, for me, it's about the journey of authenticity. Coaching, it's so funny. Words, language. I've always had a resistance to the word coach, even though I was a basketball player and I was actually a coach myself for a girls' basketball team. And while I resonate, I feel like, I don't know, the coaching world has been saturated with a specific archetype that, to me, it's not disingenuous, but it's just lost the level of authenticity. So in other words, I feel like those that are coaching or holding space or facilitating energy, whatever word resonates with you, I feel it's tied into true authenticity. So for now, what I've learned in this entrepreneurial experience is that I can't teach something that I haven't embodied fully myself, right? So, it's like I learn a little bit and then I go and teach it, because when you teach something, you learn it twice, right? And I'm here to learn Sagittarius, which is the teacher. But I'm also here to have this first house. So first house astrologically means the I am, right? So I am the embodied presence of what I have experienced. And it's from that space that I can hold true, authentic space, because I've lived it. I don't teach or share anything that I personally have not experienced in my own life, because it feels disingenuous. And when I've tried to maybe teach from a teaching that I read that I thought was really cool, and so I wanted to teach on it. But until I had a lived experience with that particular teaching, it wasn't translating as an authentic experience. And so it's been really the process of taking off all the layers and the masks of who I wasn't, that I had to create in survival mode. Because I will say that part of the healing and the awareness that I had to be aware of with myself is that I had a people pleaser quality because I was in hospitality and that served me at that time and space. But in these realms, when you're doing the deep dive and you're doing shadow work and you're really getting to the root of why things are happening in your life, you can't be people pleasing. You have to be your authentic self. And so I feel like the current state of coaching now is that those who have truly embodied their shadow, their light, accept themselves for who they are, and then teach or share from that space is what I feel like humanity's craving right now more than ever, the authenticity. That's what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And as someone who struggles with people pleasing myself, I can relate because when you people please, you're putting out a fake self, right? And
Yes,
they always say that people pleasers need an anger translator, and so
true
there's no doubt
story.
about it. Yeah, and but it's not good to obviously bottle up the anger or suppress. It's a normal human emotion, and of course you have to be real. You have to be authentic. People are attracted to authenticity. My understanding is that people buy coaches, not coaching, so to speak,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
you mentioned that you have that lived experience, which helps with the authenticity. You can relate. You've been there and done that. And you mentioned the word embodied, right? Love. And so you also said the shadow work. And okay, so can you expand on that? And by the way, I do agree with you that obviously when you teach, you do learn twice. Yes, that's absolutely true. So what do you mean by shadow?
Well, gosh, I guess depending on who you're talking to, everybody's got their own relationship with shadow. For me, it's the parts of me that I have denied or repressed to feel safe around other people. So what I've deep dived into is that, we live in a society and a culture where we want to be accepted, and a lot of that is based on survival. If we're not expected by the community or the group, then we're outcasted, and that gets directly related to whether we can eat and have shelter and things of that nature based on our communities, right? So we have that inherently in us. So I believe that all of us have what I call a spiritual biofilm, a protective mechanism that our nervous system created to feel safe around others. So what I'm sensing now with the shadow work is removing all of that sediment, those layers, that biofilm that you created while you were in survival mode. And it's removing all that you're not so that you can really show up on who you really are. And a lot of us haven't really met our true selves yet, right? We've been living in the shadow of somebody else's expectations, of our family dynamics, of our cultural dynamics, of our root system, our history, what other people expected so we could feel safe. So a lot of us really don't know who we are. And that's okay. I believe that's a rite of passage of humanity. It's a maturation process that we all have to go through. But to me, the key is in committing to the road to authenticity no matter what. You have to make that arrangement and agreement with yourself, and then be able and willing to sit with whatever shows up in that experience, for right or wrong, good or bad, if it's uncomfortable. And a lot of us don't like to be uncomfortable, right? That's why we created escapist tendencies, and we have certain behaviors because we don't feel safe in our bodies. Our nervous system doesn't feel safe to be our authentic selves. So we drink, we smoke, we overeat, we overwork. We just have these patterns collectively that all of us experience. We're not exempt from it. But when you understand your own patterns and give yourself compassion and love for those disincarnated parts of yourself that you had to repress to feel safe, that you couldn't feel like you could be yourself because it wasn't safe to be yourself. That's where I feel like we're all moving towards. And it's like an exoskeleton. It's removing itself anyway. It's like we've outgrown these old outer shells that were created when our nervous system can only handle that amount of energy. But now we're all being upgraded because of the astrological energies and because of these currents that we find ourselves in collectively. So we don't live in a vacuum. We live in what's called, some philosophies call it the Indra's net, right? Where we're all connected to these nodal points like a spider web. And when one part of the spider web moves, it moves all of us. And so just bringing awareness to that we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live independently, even though there's a paradox. We are independent beings. It's like one drop of the ocean is still the whole ocean, right? So this is where the philosophy and sort of the spiritual embodiment comes in. And that in and of itself is a journey. And that requires you to face aspects of yourself you don't really like? How can you learn to love aspects of yourself you don't really like? And so that to me has been a pivotal journey in what I call shadow work.
Okay. And thank you so much for clarifying what that, because I'm sure some other folks may have listened to that and said, what exactly is that? But
Yeah.
you get a very detailed explanation on that. And so you guide folks on coming to terms with the things they may deny or repress. And you mentioned that we're obviously, because it reminds me of what Katria, I had a conversation with him yesterday, and he talked about this idea that we're one community, one heart. So, one thing happening over there impacts things happening over here and
Yes.
whatnot. So I totally can understand that, because it's all interdependent, so to speak. And now I'm curious. Now, there's obviously some people, you've probably encountered them, naysayers, who listen to this and think this is all pseudoscience or quackery or whatnot, and perhaps they're just skeptical of coaching in general, thinking someone could do this on their own in terms of personal development. What would you say to them?
Well, to me, the best coaches and the most effective coaches are the ones who can coach themselves. How do you talk to yourself when no one's around? This is tied into integrity. This is tied into honoring your commitment without having anybody else be there to tell you, hey, you got to get up earlier because you said you wanted to change this about your patterns, about your habits. Are you doing that? So for me, it's an accountability commitment to self to grow, even pushing past the part of you that doesn't want to get up in the morning, that feels lazy or feels overwhelmed, and laziness is not a bad thing. It just might be the nervous system shutting down saying, hey, I don't feel safe to do this, right? So it's having that ability to coach yourself through those moments when you know you should be doing something and you're not doing it. And instead of beating yourself up or berating yourself and using the language of a negative mindset, it's really about learning to coach your own inner shadow self that is resisting growing, that is resisting becoming your most authentic self because it felt safe in that little space, right? So that to me, and you can feel that when somebody coaches themselves and then projects that out and talks about their ability to coach themselves and do it in an authentic way, I feel like that's what people are looking for right now. We've got a lot of configurations in the sign of Aries, which is about self-starting, independent, initiating. So it's really, to me, coaches who can truly embody and coach themselves and then project that out. That's where I feel the future of coaching really lies, and who's really truly embodying and speaking from that authentic place, because we can feel it. Humans right now, we're tapping into our ability to be telepathic, into our intuitive ability. So we know when somebody's BSing. You know it within the first few seconds of scrolling. You're a social media person, so you know what you're attracted to and what resonates. And it's a resonant vibrational universe that we are a part of. And so when the vibe is off, literally the vibrations are off, they're dissonant, you can feel it. Feel it in your nervous system. You can feel it within the first few seconds of meeting somebody, truly. And we've always had that ability. We just forgot. Again, we've been in a certain architecture in this realm, and that's not always been conducive to honoring that intuitive part of us. It's been mostly, logical, masculine, linear, intellectual, very, high intelligence, which is great. But if you don't know how to build the muscle of your intuition, which lies in your gut, your inner knowing, your sixth sense, that's also a faculty that to me is just as important, if not more important, than the logical mind.
Okay. And so it's all about obviously how one self coaches, that self talk. They have to sort of practice what they preach, right? Not just
Yes. Well,
talk the
live it.
talk, walk the walk. Yeah.
Yes. Live it. And be vulnerable
Yeah.
about it. I think a lot of times, because I used to do this, I think that I had to reach a certain level or a certain pillar of success in my life to be able to be credible, right? Then I was finding myself attracting to the people that were actually on their journey of not being perfect and just being themselves, and I found more value in somebody saying, hey, I didn't show up for myself today, but this is how I processed it, this is how I love myself through it. That to me is more genuine than somebody who has a pretty wrapped package and look at my beautiful house, look at my beautiful car, and this is the money you can make because you've done these things. I feel like even that's illusionary. And we're starting to see more and more of that with the coaches, these false gurus, these false savior types. There's a giant collapse happening within this realm, and it needs to, because we can't be led astray by people who are not fully embodying and doing the work. And I think humanity unfortunately has been. And so we're starting to be aware of that and coming into, well, what does authenticity look like and feel like? And some of us are new to it. We've never really felt it before in our bodies. So it's a new expression. So I just say, whoever you're drawn to, if they activate you, they make you feel good, their words soothe you and empower you and ignite you, then keep on with that vibration. It's like a radio station. Stay tuned to that channel. But if you're listening to things that don't empower you, that feel dissonant, just like a child's mind, turn it off. It didn't feel good, don't do it. But again, it's a phase. It's part of maturation, and it's a rite of passage. And all of humanity is going through this rite of passage right now. None of us are exempt. But we're in process, and I'm hopeful about the process, especially when we can start talking about it and really sharing our own unique experiences with this energy, because that's what people are craving, I feel, from what I've seen in my clients.
Okay, yeah. And I totally agree. You mentioned power of intuition because you can sense it, feel it when someone's off
Mm-hmm.
or if they're faking it, right? And so people need to tap into that intuition. So many people say that intuition is one of the keys to being safe and preventing victimization by criminals and whatnot. So there's something to it.
I mean,
When you have that feeling.
it's funny. I've even experienced, Luke, where I've been invited to parties or certain events, and I'll say yes because out of habit. I'm like, okay, I want to be there with my friends. I want to, show up for them, whatever. And then all of a sudden I get sick, or I wake up with a migraine. I'm like, I can't go to the party. I'm like, why is this happening right now? What's going on? And I've learned that my body will shut down on me if she doesn't want to have an experience. That there's this intuition telling me, hey, there might be something going on at that party that you're not a vibrational match to, and you're not really listening right now. So I'm going to just shut it down, and you're going to have a headache, and you're going to, and not be able to go. And so I started paying attention to these patterns of like, oh, when I don't listen to my intuition, my body, like in a secondary level, will shut down on me and say, no, girl, you ain't going. I said, no, you felt no. But you felt obligated because you wanted to, again, the residual people pleasing. So you wanted to be there for your friends or family or whatever, but you weren't really wanting to go. So since you can't say no, I'm going to say no for you. And that to me is embodiment, because then your actual body is talking and saying, no, there's something not right about this. Even it bypasses the logical mind. And I feel like that's what I trust. And I'm learning to trust more and more and more as I step into these intuitive notions, because again, it's not logical. Intuition is just an inner knowing. It's ineffable, really, but you just have to learn to trust it, and that's, to me, the practice.
Right. And this idea, reminds me of a book I've been meaning to read. The title of The Body Keeps Score, right? And it's somewhat related to what you were talking about. And obviously you have to have that mind-body alignment, right?
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
So it's interesting. Now you've talked a lot about your lived experience and how that helps you to be a coach, and you've of course studied extensively in astrology and other modalities and whatnot. I want to know if you can just expand on that, because obviously there's so many people who do what you do or similar, right? Who are coaches. It's an unregulated industry. Anyone could wake up tomorrow and say, "Hey, I'm a coach." But I'm wondering, what is your competitive advantage? Like, how do you stand out?
Well, literally, I'm a 6 foot tall woman, so that stands out. I carry a presence in the physical realm, right? But I guess for me, I'm rewording even the idea of competition. Because again, I go into the philosophical. I really love Alan Watts as a philosopher. He's one of my go-tos, and actually, my dad's name is Alan Watts. John Alan Watts, kind of funny. But it's like, the oak tree doesn't compare itself or compete to the bamboo tree, right? They just are who they are. And so I'm learning not to compete with others, but to compete with the version of who I was yesterday or the day before, to be my best version self. And what that's tied into is really doing what I love and putting that charge, that energy, that life force energy behind all of my creations. And there's a difference between forcing content because, the social media platforms and whatnot saying, hey, for you to be successful, you've got to have so many reels put out there and so many videos. And yes, there is a system to that. And there's a certain percentage of that that's accurate. But I find that when I was sharing content just because I was showing up to share content, because that's what they said how I was going to build my business, that felt disingenuous. I didn't feel the energy that day. I didn't feel like I really wanted to show up that day, right? So, and then there was days that I really had a lot to say. And so I just jumped on and I didn't overthink it. The competition was, hey, you showed up for yourself today. Give yourself the win. You push through your fear. You push through your fear of being seen, of your voice being heard, of your opinion. Does it matter? Who's going to listen? All these internal voices that keep us small and keep us, again, safe. Because if we're recovering people pleasers, we just want to please everybody in our life. And sometimes there's things that want to come through you that are not going to always people please. They actually might cause some division and might challenge some people, right? So, but at that point, the competition is really, can you be your more authentic self today than you were yesterday? Can you remove that layer where you didn't feel safe being your true self? And so I feel like more and more people, they can do that inner work, and it's an inner landscape. It's an inner architecture that you have to develop. It's like a scaffolding. So you've got to demolish all the aspects of you that are not you anymore so that you can make room for who you truly are that's always been there. It's like a default system, like our cells. Yeah, that's the best way I can explain that.
Okay. So you have this presence, right? 6 feet tall, and you talked about your experience of putting yourself out there, and some days you feel like doing it, some days not so much, but you push through the fear, right? And, I always tell people that for many, fear stands for false expectations or emotions appearing real, or forget everything and run. But if you work on it, fear can stand for face everything and rise. It's a signal for growth. There's no doubt about it.
But I would say too, there's a nuance there, Luke, because I had to learn to decipher, am I pushing through my fear, or does my body really not want to experience this right now because I'm depleted and my cup is not full? You see, I had to learn to trust my intuition, because if I didn't really go inward and find out why am I not showing up, or why am I feeling fear, and it may just be a day where, hey, you don't have the energy, your cup is empty, you just need to rest today. And so my shadow would come up and be like, oh, well, you're just being lazy. Right? Like I'd start criticizing myself for wanting to rest. And then I realized, wait a minute, everybody needs a day off. And when you're an entrepreneur, sometimes it's hard to regulate when you take time off, because you always feel like you got to be doing and producing. And, you don't ever want to lose that momentum. But at the same time, you have to honor your body and your own inner wisdom when it says, hey, today's not a work day. You need to go outside and ground. You need to get some sun. You need to balance this out. We don't want you on technology today. It's too depleting. So see, it's nuanced. It's learning to differentiate. Am I having a fear day and I need to push past it? Or am I just depleted and I need to rest today? So it's very nuanced, I feel. And again, it's the practice. You have to experience it. There's no better teacher than experience itself, in my opinion.
Right. Absolutely. Because all training is, for the most part, on the job. No doubt about it. And when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you have to wear a lot of hats.
Yes.
And oftentimes learn and trust to delegate. And you also have to keep in mind this battle between, are you being lazy versus are you actually really tired and have to recharge, right? And so I'm sure in your case, it's more so the latter. And and so, and again, it goes back to the body keeps score, right?
Yes.
You don't want to be running on an empty fuel tank that it's going to show up physically for sure in some way, form, or another. Now, I'm curious. Now, I'm sure you've gotten beyond phenomenal results and progress for your clients. And I wanted to know if you could tell us some of the most moving or entertaining stories from your life or career. These could be success stories, folks you've worked with, or personal stories.
Serendipitously, I was on a television show. I was asked to be on a television show called Drinking Made Easy when they were looking at they went to our restaurant to, and that was fun, right? Again, I always feel like I don't want to call it star quality, but I do have Jupiter first house. So Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. And it's a benevolent planet. And they call it benevolent because it's got the largest gravitational pull. So if there's any meteors or things that are going to hit the planet, the gravitational pull of Jupiter actually pulls things away from the Earth. So it's called the benefactor, right? It's a beneficiary energy. And because that planet, again, we're looking at the astrological lens. And for those who want to know more about astrology, of course, you can reach out because it is a language. But through the astrological lens, Jupiter in my first house is how people first see me. Right? They see me as that benevolence. I'm very smiley. I'm very outgoing. I'm genuinely kind. And I present myself as that. So, in my motto, one of my life mottos is I want to get it honest, whether it's clients, success, money, relationship. I want to do it with integrity. Actually, I don't want to. I choose to honor integrity in relationship in every moment. And so people can feel that within me. And again, it's a testament to all the inner work I've done to love myself through my shadow periods, through the times I didn't show up for myself, through the times I disappointed myself. Can I love myself anyway? Can I like myself, even again, when I'm feeling unlovable? And so this is the greater mission, because when you can do that, you hold that technology within you without having to say a word. You just carry it and you emit it like a frequency, like cymatics. If you ever checked into cymatics, every vibration carries a sound or a mandala. And we all have these vibrational sounds within us. And it's learning to be our own tuning forks, to tune up our frequency, to harmonize who we are. And that really takes radical self-love and self-acceptance and self-nurturance. And that in and of itself is a process. So I think the funnest thing for me, I've been invited to, again, be on certain shows. I don't know. I just try to be present with each moment. And if you guys want to check out that episode, it's Drinking Made Easy, the Clearwater Beach episode. And that was really fun because I go back and look at that. That was actually filmed in 2015. And it was just a fun expression, and I've had I've met many different famous peoples, because then when you work in hospitality, I've been to certain golfing events where I've met superstars, and you know what I found about famous people in my experience with meeting famous people is they're just like you and I. Honestly, they have just the same insecurities, the same hangups. They're just more attention is drawn to them, which that's one of the things I really loved about bartending, because I learned to treat everybody equal. Right? Whether it was, somebody that was living on the street that wanted to come in for a beer, that had just enough money for a beer, I would talk to them the same as I would talk to, a famous baseball player that would come to the Clearwater area. And so that to me is when I feel my gifts, is that we're all basic humans. We're all humans, no matter what our status is in life. And that seems to have served me and made life more fun and made people more receptive to my energy, because I carry that vibration. If that makes any sense.
Wow. It makes perfect sense. So whether someone is rich or famous, or someone just only has enough to get one beer, you treat them the same. They're just basic humans,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
no doubt about that. That have a lot in common, more in common than different. You
Yes.
mentioned Drinking Made Easy. Definitely going to check that one out. And all right. Well, I always love to talk to people about their famous celebrity stories. And I guess it's not always appropriate, but any one or two you want to name drop? If you don't, I totally understand.
Well, surprisingly, when I met Derek Jeter, he wasn't as kind and sociable as most people give him credit. That was kind of an interesting, some people wear their fame certain ways. It was also fun to watch Kevin Costner play in his band at a Valspark. It was like a co-am or whatever, when it's like famous people and they do golf. This was years ago. And that was kind of interesting to see him play in a band. He won't remember this because he didn't know my name, but I was hit on by Mark Wahlberg at one point at that same thing, and that was kind of funny because I'm 6 foot tall and he's like 5'4", so that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I always look for the common bonds of people, because that's where I'm at in my personality and just how we're more alike than different. And it doesn't really matter who we are. We all just want to be seen. We want to be respected. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted for who we are. And so I tend to meet people there. Again, no matter what their stardom is or how much notoriety. Because I'll tell you, I've seen people can get very diminished and overwhelmed when there's a lot of people around that they have to present themselves a certain way. And again, one of my gifts is a lot of people tell me their secrets because they say they trust me because I don't carry those judgment codes. Again, I tend to honor the shadow and not mind looking at it. So, because we all have it, it's just varying degrees. So, yeah.
Okay, and thank you so much for sharing those stories. It's interesting. And now, obviously, you learned so much, right? You had that playground of
Mm-hmm.
uh, dealing with so many people of
Mm-hmm.
all types and learning astrology and whatnot. Now, as an aspiring life coach, I'd love to know, particularly your answer to this next question. How do you find clients? Now, I'm sure at this point you probably get a lot of referrals, but maybe before that, I guess when you were just starting out, how do you get folks?
Well, I first was invited to share my astrology at certain metaphysical shops. I'm actually doing, since I am nomadic by nature, I will go and connect with the local metaphysical places around me. So I'm in Kentucky right now, so I'm going to be doing a pop-up astrology event in Lexington at a place called White Willow Emporium. And so what I've done is I've built myself, because I am on all the social media platforms, of course, except for LinkedIn. I'm just not really resonating with LinkedIn these days. But I basically have formed my content. And so when I go to approach a business or a shop that might be open to something that I offer, I always have, well, you can find my bio and just check out my vibe and see if we're a vibrational match. I try not to sell anything because what I do is deeply intuitive. And so it's got to be an alignment thing. You know, the owner of the business has to align with my content. I come from unity consciousness, that we are all one, that separation is an illusion. I come from many different peripheries in the metaphysical realm, numerology, astrology. I just did a post on Rudolf Steiner and how that was connected to astrology. So I just take a lot of different, I think of it like a web, like a spider, right? And I pull different peripheries of consciousness, and then I interweave it with the language of astrology. So, and people will feel my vibe right off the bat and say, oh yeah, you're a vibrational match. And a lot of times I get, repeat clients or people that just really have given a lot of reviews to say, wow, you are different, you are unique. I felt like I could be myself around you. I do record the session so people can always go back and rewatch it, because my goal is not, I know this is probably not good to say this as a coach, but I don't necessarily want repeating clients unless they need a tune-up. I feel like I give so much in that either 75-minute or 90-minute transmission, and I give them jewels, and that's why we record it, because a lot of the times this stuff is channeled. I mean, I've got the basic foundation of astrology anchored in because I've studied it so long, and now it's just moving with the currents based on, we always set intention before we go into a session. We breathe together because intention is paramount. Setting the sacred container is very paramount, whether you're doing it online or in person. And so it's really feeding people back that aspect of themselves that they need at that time, and then giving them actionable steps to work on. And it's usually within a 6-month period. It's like, sometimes we get addicted to content and we're consuming content, but we're not implementing the systems that these coaches are saying to do. So it's like, hey, go implement these systems. There was a lot that came through. And then let's do a follow-up in 6 months or 3 months or whenever you're feeling called, and see where you're at there. And then a lot of the times people are just telling themselves what they need to hear. I'm just the reflection. I'm just looking at it from the astrology and glyphs and their chart so that they can believe it, so they can receive basically themselves through the information that I'm sharing. If that makes any sense.
Okay, and thank you so much for that. So my understanding is, and you had mentioned this when we first met virtually, that you're a digital nomad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no matter where you are, you try to look for locations related to metaphysical. And okay. Um, but you also are not a big fan of LinkedIn. Totally understand that. LinkedIn obviously has that businessy vibe,
Yeah.
like cholerish vibe. But you're also on the other social media channel. Just so you know, that will be in the show notes, so people can reach out there. But what hit home with me is that you're not looking for repeat customers, and or just in case if they need a tune up. But
Mm-hmm.
so my understanding, it's usually 6 months, And you mentioned that you oftentimes reflect back to them like a mirror. So you're not really telling them what to do, but you're just reflecting their aura, their vibe, so to speak. And you give them questions or whatnot.
Well, I'll just give an example really quick, just from the little bit I know about you, Luke. So you say
Sure.
you're a Gemini, right?
Yes.
So Geminis are considered the linguists, the communicators of the zodiac, right? They're ruled by Mercury. And the interesting thing about the planet Mercury, it's the only god in the pantheon of the archetypes of Olympus that can go to the underworld. Mercury can go to Mount Olympus or it can go to Hades, right? Safely. And to me, what that represents is that Mercury can, you can travel the higher realms of people, and you can also talk about the shadow things in people, and you do it in a graceful, easy way. So when right now, just knowing your sunshine, where you've come to sun to show your light was in Gemini, it's about communicating. So then the next layer I would look to see, because I would need to know the time of day you were born, the longitude, latitude, where you were born. And then I would see, well, where is the sun in Gemini? What house system? So where did you come to shine? Well, just this conversation, I see you're working with the bigger public, right? The bigger community, all of humanity. So my guess would be in the 11th house, right? Working with the public, working with groups, connecting with all of humans, right? Sharing your gift of the ability to travel to the human highs and the human lows, because Mercury is your ruling planet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And I'm learning so much from you, particularly about Mercury. It can go up or down, I
Mm-hmm.
see. So, because obviously I don't know as much about zodiac and astrology based on years ago. I just read what it was on, what it said about it in the paper. This was like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And and obviously, I'm learning so much from you. I'm curious now, since we're on the topic of networking and meeting with people,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to know, and I always give this question to coaches, what type of folks do you normally work with? If you can just kind of go into more detail, like what must I hear from someone in order to refer them to you?
Well, thank you for that. It's interesting. My clients are all over. I go from metaphysical people to business minded people to other fellow astrologers. I actually feel very honored that when I do show up, say at a metaphysical event, and I'm, sharing my offerings, that other readers and other metaphysicians come to me for a reading. And I thought, wow, that's, because I've always had a vision of healing the healers and working with leaders, because leaders hold a lot of space and they sacrifice a lot, but I feel like they don't give to themselves as much as they do to their clients. So I'm really here for those that are helping others in these spaces. So that's what seems to be the people that are drawn to my content, because and as a client, are those that are really in service to other people's in a big way. So whether it's a president of a company, right? Because a lot of times, they find success in the material realms, right? But then they feel like their soul is lost and they're incomplete. And they're like, yeah, I've got all this money in the bank, but what am I going to do with it? How come I don't feel complete? Well, perhaps your soul, you're looking at your spiritual, how, you've really exaggerated the material aspect of self, but what have you done on a soul level? So it's just bringing people back into awareness that we're all of it. And we have these aspects to be a truly healthy, happy human. That's where this 5 pillars of wellness came in. Is like, you really need to have a grounded approach to how you handle, first of all, your spiritual nature. Second, your mental constructs, because it's a mental reality, goes back into Hermeticism. Third is your emotional body, right? How you feel about being in your skin and in the situations around you. And of course, the physical, right? How good do you feel in your body? Because you can have all the money in the world, but if you're sick and you don't feel well, then you can't really fully express yourself. And then lastly is the financial realm, which is our current. And I think of our energy system, right? Currents are energy. It's like, that's what we talk about in the banking system, like water. And so there's a whole nother deep dive download occult going into the language surrounding our current and currency, and how it's really our energy that we exchange in monetary forms. but it's us. It's our creative ability. And to charge, that's why we call it, we charge clients, right? Where you're charging the field, think of like electricity. You're charging the current around you, and how much you charge the current and how much you allow yourself to receive back in the law of reciprocity. That's where this balance comes in, and then people will be drawn to that. And so the money, to me, in this nomadic lifestyle, money has always appeared when I needed it because I've called that in. All my needs are met, more than met. And so to me, in that regard, I'm very successful because I have all my needs met. I'm very, what's the word? I don't require a lot, as far as the material. I've been a minimalist for many years too. So you really don't need a lot. You just really, at our basics, good, fresh water, clean air, a safe roof over your head, and good food and good friends. And that's what we all want. At the core, a foundation. Everything else is just a story and just a bonus, in my opinion.
Okay. That's so true. And I favor that minimalist lifestyle. It's all about decluttering and removing what I don't necessarily need, viewing everything as a bonus. Absolutely. You went over the 5 pillars, which is great. You talked about healing the healers and working with leaders. These are folks who give so much and so more. It reminds you of teachers and nurses and doctors and firefighters. And so you work with these types of folks,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Totally love that. And so again, thank you so much for that. This will be an episode I'll be re-listening to a bunch. So much wisdom that you've imparted with us today. I'm curious now, obviously as a woman, and you mentioned that you also worked in hospitality and whatnot. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. Have you ever, unfortunately, ever experienced sexism or any kind of discrimination on your journey? And if so, how did you overcome it?
With laughter. Because, yeah, I think, especially in that business and being a woman, and there's a whole dynamic, gosh, we can do a whole podcast episode just on that. Because, in hospitality, especially being a female bartender, a lot of my currency, right, how I was paid is based on, you can get a Bud Light anywhere, right? But how do you present yourself? You look good. I was at a beach bar, right? So I always felt the pressure to be working out and looking good and being tan, and because that's part of the whole persona, right? They're not just buying a Bud Light at the bar, they want a whole experience. But ironically enough, I have experienced sexism from men, just is that, oh, you're a cute little girl there, and thank you. But I've also experienced sexism from women because there's this insidious competition model to be the prettiest or the most liked or the one that gets all the attention because then they make the most money, right? So it's such an interesting realm dynamic to work in. And to see it, to witness it, one of the books that I follow that have been pivotal to me learning how to really, truly accept humanity for how they are and to be my authentic self and not take anything so personally is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or not, but there's just some guiding principles there that, again, just don't take things so personally. People are only coming from their own set of experiences and how they've learned to be in the world. And so when I've noticed, being a taller woman, I intimidate men just by my height. And I could tell the men I intimidate because I'd always shake hands. That was one of my ways of introducing myself when anybody approached the bar. I'd always stick out my hand. Hi, I'm Ella, da 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 da. And I could always tell the men that were intimidated because they really shake my hand and it's shaking hard, right? Like I was a man. And I'd pull my hands back, go, ow, dude, I'm a female. You ain't got to grip me like that. And so I would learn to call it out in a funny way and just try to have fun with it. Again, learning not to take it so personal because we all have these tendencies. We all have these shadow aspects. And if we feel intimidated or we were raised to have certain expectations about the other gender, then that's just going to show up. And for me, it's learning not to take it so personally, honestly. So yes, I've experienced it, but I've just learned to put it in its place and realize it's just part of the human condition. And for my own sanity, because I don't want to get too much into the stories. I feel like we're here to rewrite the stories right now. And that's just a story in humanity that I feel like we're all learning to evolve out of, slowly but surely, in my opinion.
Okay, and thank you so much for that. So you mentioned that, of course, you've experienced it in that industry, but it's the way you I guess, responded to it, or the way you were able to reframe it. And you mentioned the book, The Four Agreements. I
Mm-hmm.
think I read it a while ago, but it's probably worth a reread. This was the book that was based off the wisdom of the Olmec tribe, right?
The
Like in
Toltecs, yes.
Central America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oltecs? Okay.
Toltec?
I think the Four Agreements were the Olmec, but I could be wrong because it was like I think they were based in Central America or South America or something. Yeah, yeah. Oh no, Toltecs, Toltec wisdom. Yeah, and so yeah, I'm mixing up my tribes here. So yes, Toltecs, and so it's been passed down from a very long time, and so again, not taking things personally, right? And as they say, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond.
That's right.
And so this handshake deal, oh my goodness, wow. I thought you were going to say the reverse, that they would shake your hands too loosely. You're saying it was too tight. Okay. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Only the men that were intimidated by me because of my height. Because I'd always get
Ooh.
that. That was always the thing that always, oh, you're so tall. How tall are you? Or you're a basketball breeder. And I'm like, okay, I'm not here to play basketball. I'm just here to serve you a drink. But okay, you're creating whatever story you want because obviously you feel inadequate because I'm 3 inches taller than you. But okay, we'll play this game. It was just like, again, having grace for people's shadows, and again, not taking it personally. And it's knowing yourself. Hey, I didn't ask to be born this way. My mother and my 6'6" father, my 5'8" mother got together, and here I am, and now I have a 6'7" son. So I just call us land of the giants, and the Nephilim. I just try to again have fun with it. But again, the key is not taking somebody else's shadow, because you see, it's about them. If they're feeling intimidated or they're feeling insecure and they feel like they need to exert, it's just up to you to set those boundaries. And I would do it in a fun way, but like, ow, dude, you don't gotta crush my hand. I'm still a female. Or if I was feeling sexism from a woman that was feeling intimidated, or I was feeling intimidated, I would just not take it too seriously and just be like, okay, this is a beautiful woman. I'm a beautiful woman. There's no competition here. We're all here to make money. We're all here to live our best lives. I would just check myself when I would catch myself getting into these thought processes. It's just, to me, it's just catching yourself sooner. And just being, again, having more grace with when these negative thoughts, not if these negative thoughts come up, it's when they come up, what you choose to do about it in the now. That's why living in the now, they call it the present's a gift. That's our point of power. It's our 0 point. It's being present when these energies surface. Right. So.
Yeah. I think when we spoke earlier, what you were saying is reminding me of that book by Eckhart Tolle about the power of now. And then, yeah, I'm very surprised about the whole section from women. I guess maybe I shouldn't be too surprised. I think it was Madeleine Albright who said there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other out or whatever. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't.
Well, see, and that's another whole podcast, because we were indoctrinated to do that. Again, if your career is based on survival and it's about being the most beautiful, there's this great song I love. It's called by Alanis Davis, called 32 Flavors. And I'm a Gen Xer, so it's in the 90s if you guys want to check that out. But one of the lines, it said, I'm trying to think, I'm singing the song in my head, but it says, and God help you if you're ugly, girl. Of course, too beautiful is also your doom. Because every woman harbors a secret hatred for the prettiest girl in the room. And so that's deep, because as a woman, you can feel that. It's like we're sizing each other up. I mean, I used to very much, especially in that, because again, beauty is tied to money, it's tied to value, it's tied if you can track, the mate with the most money, and it all goes back to protection, right? Because women want protection. So we've been trained and indoctrinated to be the most beautiful, the most sensual, to attract the man with the most money that will protect you and give you the most safety, security. You see, it's an insidious type of frequency, but it's one to be aware of. And this is why I feel like more women are becoming entrepreneurs and learning to step out of that archetype. And we're learning to embrace each other and be more friends than foes. They call it frenemy for a reason. Right? We all have that friend that we enjoy and we love, but we also are a little jealous of, right? Because for whatever reason, they have more money, they have more prestige, they're better looking, whatever. And that's part of the human experience. None of us live without going through that experience. It's just, how do you go through it? And that's the question, really.
Yeah. I guess we all feel that at the minimum that benign envy, right?
Hmm.
And that we have to watch out for. And so the 32 flavor song, I'm going to check that one out.
Yeah, Alanis
I'm a
Davis.
millennial.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Not as familiar with that, but and also it reminds you of the movie or the story Snow White about who's the fairest of them all, and she's
Yes.
going after Snow White.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, there's something about that archetype and how it's instilled and whatnot in so many ways. But women are stepping out of that by being entrepreneurial, like yourself, being a coach and being nomadic. And I'm kind of envious, right?
Well, I'm stepping out of it because I talk about these things. You see, I,
Yeah,
I allow myself to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. But then it makes me so relatable, which is why, like, oh my gosh, she's saying the things I've thought, but I've never had the balls to say. And I'm like, well, I finally have the balls to say it because obviously this is uncomfortable, but it needs to be looked at. I mean, what are we doing here? Right? So
right.
that tends to be who I attract, is those that are really looking to have those maybe uncomfortable conversations, but it's so relatable. And so, yeah, I think if more of us can just do that, especially when you show up for your coaching, just be yourself. But, share the stories that don't put you in the best light because it makes you more relatable. And it takes away this sort of hierarchical, like, again, we're done with the guru savior thing. Well, I've got to reach a certain level of prestige and philosophy and knowledge. No, you don't actually. You just have to be humanly you, which makes you connected and relatable with the other humanly humans that are all just trying to better themselves and have a different experience of this reality. And so that is the real work, truly, in my opinion.
Right. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You mentioned authenticity, right? When no one's you, right? And that's your IP, your intellectual property, your
Mm-hmm.
stories. And when you're out there and you're real and people can relate to you, you obviously repel the people you're not meant for, but you strongly attract the ones that you are
Mm-hmm.
into vibration with or not. And so there is something to that for sure. Now, I'm curious. Now, there's probably a lot of people listening to you, find what you're saying is intriguing, and would like to do what you do. What advice would you give to someone who wants to be a coach, particularly the kind of coach you are?
Learn to coach yourself and then just share your process of coaching yourself. That's the best way. Whatever niche, whatever formula you follow, whether it's human design, whether it's the gene keys, whether it's astrology, whatever formula that helps you get more into your authentic self to where you can coach yourself in a loving way and show up for yourself, then teach and share from that space. And that's where I feel you're going to find the people that are really authentically drawn to you because, again, it's like a radio station. We're in a vibrational universe and somebody can feel your vibe and they want to work with you because they want to be more in your presence, which, again, present is a gift. So the more present you are with yourself, the more you can coach yourself. And then when you're inspired to take action, then you just go up and say, hey, I just coached myself into doing this, or I just learned this approach and I'm practicing it myself. And this is what it looks like. And this is how I'm working with it. And this is, the download I received on how to navigate these energies. So I just felt compelled to share it with you. Again, I feel like we're transitioning out of the teacher, guru, savior mode and just igniting people by our own experience. And then, because I think of it like, too, like you hold a specific chemical within you, which is your personality, your construct, and then you have a chemical reaction with another. And some of those chemical reactions can be explosive, right? Incongruent, or it can create worlds and universes and businesses and amazing things. So it really, when you talk about chemistry, you have to have the chemistry with the client. And be ready too, because if you call yourself a transformational coach, be prepared and maybe let your client know, hey, you called me in, I am a transformer. So be ready for the transformations that are coming, whether you're calling it in or not, because I have certain chemistry within me, but that just by being in my field is going to create that chemical reaction, for better or worse, right or wrong. So it's always really good to prepare people what they're getting into, because all of a sudden people say they want change, but then you invite in that change and then they freak out like, oh my gosh, my life is changing so fast. Well, that's what you wanted. So again, it all goes back to knowing thyself and knowing the capacity that you have to create that change within yourself and then share your process. That's what I'm learning.
Wow, thank you so much. That's phenomenal advice, particularly for someone like myself who's an aspiring life coach. It's all about coaching yourself That's self-coaching, whatever you teach others, you have to do it. And it goes back to what you mentioned before. You have that lived experience as well, fully embodied. And so, but you also have to properly forewarn folks about the transformation, major chemical reactions. So they have to be ready. Right. And so let them know what's in store for them, set the right expectations. And I'm curious now, what advice would you give to someone who's looking for a coach? Now, they can go to you, which would be an excellent decision. But let's say you're busy, you're on vacation skiing in the French Alps, or maybe you have your hands full with so many clients, you can't take on anyone extra. What tips would you give to someone who's looking to hire a coach?
Well, I guess to ask, what's your why? What are you needing? What would be the investment? Because when you're, again, calling in somebody who has a certain level of expertise, you're calling in something that you perceive that they have that you need or want, right? So again, it's going back to really knowing what you need. And a lot of people don't know what they need, right? So this is why, maybe listening to podcasts and just figuring out what pings them, what chemically activates them, will inspire you to want to go to the next step. So, for example, if you're looking to become an entrepreneur, you're going to want to follow those people who are entrepreneur minded and who give reasonable and solid advice and who you perceive as successful. And we're not talking about financial success, although that's one aspect to it. But do you see them successful as a person? Do they enjoy what they do? Do they show up and they're fully authentic to themselves and you can just feel it? I think of like podcasters like Candace Owen, right, who's actually in the running for the #1 podcast right behind Joe Rogan, right? And so, when you listen to her, she's just authentically herself. She curses, she does certain things, she's just calling things out. And people are really resonating with her, right? Because in a way, she's a bit of a coach, coaching people. Hey, you could be yourself and do this too. Just show up. Show up. You don't have to be perfect. And so when you're looking for a coach, I would say, or you're attracting a coach into your life, do they live the life that inspires you? Do they make you laugh? Do they make you feel good about yourself? Is there something in this being, this person that you want to learn from, that you want to connect to and have that chemical reaction within yourself? So this is going into trusting your intuition and knowing your why, really knowing your motivation. Why do you want the coach? What are you looking to experience? Not so much achieve, because it's the journey. It's not so much the destination. So what experience, what journey do you want to be on? And see who vibes, who resonates, who feels good when you listen to them, who inspires you. And so I get inspiration from so many different aspects. I don't watch social media anymore. I stream my movies. When I watch movies, I call it watching it with my third eye, conscious movie watching. Because again, I'm always looking for the connection points and the synchronicities of what my higher self, what my guidance system is showing me in that moment. So whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast or washing my dishes, I'm just always connected to that sense of inner community, that connection, that meditative practice. And it's a practice. It's a muscle that I've learned to build. And so I'm attracted to other practitioners and coaches who embody that myself. And yeah, that would be my answer to that question.
Okay, and love the answer. And as you talk, I'm writing and jotting down notes. Fun. So you want to answer the question of why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking for a coach, you shop around. It has to be someone who's a role model, again, who walks the talk, right?
Yes.
You mentioned this is beyond financial. Again, it goes back to the 5 pillars,
Mm-hmm.
and you also stated intuition again, so important, and you can spot out a fake, right? And people can just feel it, so to
Yes.
speak. You also mentioned, was it Candace Owen who's giving Joe Rogan a run for his money? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. She's in tied for third
Okay.
place for the #1 podcaster right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Rogan was under his moat is being breached, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, she is a firebrand, right? I think it's the right word to call it.
Yes.
Candace Owens.
Yes. She's
And
incredible.
she's not afraid.
She's funny. She doesn't take herself too seriously. She talks about serious matters, but does it in a way that just, she doesn't really care if she triggers people. It's kind of like, well, she's her own chemistry. If you're watching her show, I'm going to create a chemical reaction for better or worse, And to see a woman be in that position of power, that have that voice of authority, so much so that other podcasters are basing their podcast on her content that she shares. That to me is a true influencer. And, she was fired from her previous job and she started from ground zero. So anybody can do it. Really, it's just getting to that level of authenticity, but you have to go through the fire to do it. There's no other way to get around it. So somebody, maybe when you're looking for a coach that will help you go through the fire, or at least help you navigate the fire that's ahead of you. You're not going to escape it, but there's a way to navigate it that brings more grace and ease and helps you really lean into your authenticity, whatever that may be. And you may haven't discovered it yet. Maybe you're on the road to discovering your authentic voice, which a lot of us are, especially women entrepreneurs. So,
Well, she is an excellent example of raw authenticity, right? And how people gravitate towards it. So definitely want to check out her show. My friend likes her. I love that she's opinionated and she's a woman of color and is a role model in that way. And so I love that. She definitely has charisma, personality. There's no doubt about it. And so during our conversation, you shared so much profound wisdom and knowledge, so many vital life lessons. I'm curious, in addition to what you've already mentioned, are there any other vital life lessons you've learned yourself or from others along the way you'd like to share with us?
wow, see what wants to be shared in this moment. Well, I think one of the core foundations, fundamentals that I've learned, that I've applied to my life that has served me very well, is always leave others, places, situations better than you found them. Know your values. Know what your standards are. What your integrity really entails. And when you can really identify, and I call it the life of virtue, right? Valor, what helps you to look at yourself in the mirror and smile at yourself because you lived an integral life for that day, do more of that. And if that requires you losing a lot of falsities, false masks, false personas, then that's part of the process. Again, it's an exoskeleton that needs to come off. And so I would recommend too, for any of your listeners that came through today, there's a really great documentary called Finding Joe, and I would highly recommend watching that. Again, it's an empowering sort of life coaching, inspirational video that goes into Joseph Campbell and the archetype of the hero's journey and how we're all on this hero's journey. And just to acknowledge that sometimes you're the hero and sometimes you're the villain in somebody's world, and to learn to accept all of it. Can you radically accept all aspects of self? Even if you don't necessarily like those aspects, can you learn to love them? Because that's how we're going to get through this thing. And the next step of our evolutionary consciousness moving forward, it's radical self-love. And it's a journey, it's a process. It's having to unlearn, to relearn, and reconfigure everything we thought we knew about this reality and about how things work. And so it's definitely a journey and it's a process, but that would be my number one focus for anybody listening right now, is just to learn to love yourself and to like yourself, even the aspects that you don't really care for, because it's all part of divinely being human. And we all have that common bond. So why not embrace it,
Yeah. So true. We all have our flaws and we've all made mistakes, made big mistakes. There's no doubt about it.
Didn't you learn from
But we
them?
have,
That's how you learn.
yeah,
That's how you
yeah.
grow.
It's definitely how you learn and you grow. And but you mentioned this idea of radical self-love, to love all the parts of you, good and bad, and obviously to learn to forgive yourself for the
Yes.
mistakes you've made, and to forgive others who
Yes.
made mistakes against you.
That's the only way you can
Well,
forgive others. If you understand the capacity to forgive yourself, that's the only way. Same thing with love.
right.
You can only love somebody and meet somebody as much as you've met yourself. And so it really
Yeah.
is an inward out process.
Well, yeah. It's a two-way street. There's no doubt about it. You got to put on your oxygen mask before you help others. You got to love yourself in order to love others, and it's all, it sort of goes both ways. And, what you mentioned also reminds me of a quote from Joe Rogan, who said that you got to be the star of your own movie, right? It's a hero's journey. There's no doubt about it. And, and when it comes to flaws, maybe you have to, as you mentioned, the word unlearn and then reassemble. So
And
there's no
maybe talk to yourself in a neutral language like, okay, so I used to act and behave this way. Does that serve me anymore? Is that my most harmonious, balanced, vibrationally abundant self? Does that serve me to continue with that personality trait or that way of thinking? And so it really takes the inner fortitude to be willing to, put your ego in check and not take things so seriously. Because, you being a Gemini, one of the things I found with my Gemini clients is that you have two ways of thinking. There's multiple ways of seeing one reality. And there's different personas, right? They call it the light and the shadow, right? Polarity. Duality is very Gemini. It's the two. And so if you can accept that you have multi aspects of self, it may not always agree. And that's okay. That's your Gemini mind just trying to figure things out and assess and assimilate data and just learn so that you can eventually, the opposite, which is Sagittarius, apply it to wisdom, right? Because Gemini is all about data collection and information, writing things down. And then the opposite sign, Sagittarius, is like, okay, so how do you take all this knowledge, this data, and how do you turn it into wisdom, into applied life lessons? So see, everything has a frequency. It's in a balance and a polarity, even within us. So just accept we have these sometimes opposing energies within us, and it's just learning to navigate it, not to judge it.
right, and totally love that. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Because Gemini's the twins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been told Geminis do like to think, and I do like to think a lot. I'm analytical.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it. And you mentioned before that, obviously, the importance of self-reflection, self-awareness, and even before that, you mentioned the idea of self-coaching, right? To coach yourself and practice what you preach. So it all kind of circles back. And so thank you again for that. So I know you mentioned a few already, but I wanted to know what are your favorite top book recommendations for folks, and what are the authors, gurus, and podcasters, bloggers that you're fans of?
Well, lately, because I've been, moving through the energy so quickly, it's hard for me to read these days just because being on social media, I think I formed a bit of an ADHD, which is fine. It's part of the process of assimilating data quickly, which is what AI really affords us. So I listen to audiobooks when I can, because of where I'm at in Kentucky, I have to drive places. It takes me usually an hour or so to go someplace. So in that time, I want to be efficient with my time. So lately, and it really just depends on what, I'll wake up with the energy and look, okay, what does my soul need to learn today? What is in the field for me to download? And then I'll just hear a name or a book. Like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, right? Because I wanted to understand the metaphysics about how to die properly. And death is not what we think, right? And then the week before, I was listening to the Four Agreements, which is why it came into my field today. Right. So it's whatever inspires me in the moment of whatever energy field I'm in at that time, things will pop up for me, synchronicities. One of my life-changing books that I still love and I go back to occasionally is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Definitely one of those serendipitous books that I did that years ago. I asked, okay, what am I supposed to be reading right now? And I went to a flea market and that book just stood out to me. It was just like highlighted. It had lights around it metaphorically. And I was like, what is this book? I never heard of it. And it was one of the books that changed my life. Again, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho was definitely influential along with the Four Agreements. And then whatever else I'm inspired to read or come across at that time, I just know it's for me because that's what I'm being guided to. I basically live a life of a walking meditation at this point. So whatever I'm inspired to read or listen to, I know it's for me. And because I programmed my brain, just like the RAS, reticular activating system, right? I'm focused on that aspect of my life, that what is benefiting me? What do I need to know? What does the collective need to know through me right now that I need to be studying, that I need to transmit into people that need to hear this information? Because we are connected, right? So it's not just doing it for me, it's doing it, yes, for myself, but also sharing the information in hopefully an embodied way from my own experience. That's all we can do, really. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Definitely, I've heard of The Alchemist. Definitely going to check that book out for sure.
Very simple read, but very profound, very deep.
Okay. Definitely. And then I'm, of course, going to reread The Four Agreements. I read it years ago. Check that one out. I'm curious, are you ever going to write a book yourself, or and of course the podcast? You can talk about that when you host. Or...
Eventually, I do. Eventually, I see myself actually writing a screenplay because I love movies. So it won't necessarily be in book form, but I do have an app that I created that's still in its beta phase. It's called AstroLingo, and it's for anyone that wants to study astrology from a very basic, fundamental premise. It's very easy to use. It's learning the symbols, it's learning the definitions, it's easy to navigate. And so I'm doing that as an offering. I'm actually teaching from that app right now. So people that are interested in astrology as a foundational lens to look at reality through. Again, it's a very neutral language. It's a system that I have found very effective and very beautiful, and it offers, because it's its own language. So people who speak astrology, that's my goal is to go to more conferences and to get into more of the deep diving with the language of astrology, because it could be, it's never ending. There's always so much to learn as far as medical astrology and evolutionary astrology and soul. You can go in so many different facets. So eventually I see myself writing a screenplay and a movie that's astrology based to get people connected to their own consciousness in a very fun and cool, creative way. And with the use of AI right now, basically I would say the gatekeepers of finances has been lessened to more creatives can use AI now in a very inexpensive way to create these really impactful movies or screenplays, or something that Hollywood normally had a command on. Now more creators are being able to utilize technology to really share their vision and tell a new story. And that's my end game. That's the bigger goal.
Okay, and so I can't wait. So AstroLingo, I'm going to check that app
Mm-hmm.
out and learn more about astrology. And the screenplay, keep me posted on that. I love
Definitely.
movies too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I learn from movies. That's the way I connect to spirit. I feel like I'm always being guided and talked to, because there's that hero's journey. There's deeper philosophical, the hero of the story is always being told. Think about Star Wars, right? It goes through the whole hero's journey, and every movie does that. So this is where Joseph Campbell, and again, if you guys want to watch that documentary that's on YouTube, it's free, called Finding Joe, you'll understand the importance of these stories that every culture has been telling since the beginning of time, and they're telling the same story about this hero's journey. It's really incredible.
Right, and we have to be sort of the hero in our own journey. There's no doubt about it. And there's something about stories, like whether it's a movie or book or whatnot, people love stories. That's why they binge watch Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you tell a story, and this is why people love personal stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does so much. Stories sell. Stories move the emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the facts tell, but stories sell, because when you tell a story, the listener, there's so many chemicals in their brain that's coming out, right? That's being produced.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and that's how we learned as a species before there was the written word, by telling stories.
That's right.
And movies are just another form of that. So there's no doubt about it. That's why I love films. I think we all do, and I love The Wizard of Oz, because the main, obviously you had Dorothy. She was the hero on this journey, and then the moral of the story, that it's all inside. You don't have to look outside, and for what you want. And love that The Wizard of Oz for that. And I'm going to definitely look into what is it, Finding Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Going to check that one out. No doubt about it. And so this is just so you know, this has been a phenomenal discussion. Wait, you do have a podcast, right?
Yes, I do. It's funny you said that I live and embody this energy, and that's why my channel and my brand is called Livzenastrology, because that was the goal, is to live these energies, right? And to live it in a Zen way that's connected to all of it without necessarily having to change what is, just change your periphery and be at peace with everything that is. And so that was the purpose of the brand, Livzenastrology. You can find me. I have a link in the bio where I have everything. It's called links at .livzenastrology.bio. And this is where it's going to take you to all my channels on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Yeah, you could just connect me there. I have some free offerings. I've got some free ebooks that I created specifically for the upcoming energy here with Pluto and Aquarius. I've also, for those that want to learn astrology, I've created a PDF 101 astrology ebook that's free to you guys. And if you want to support the channel, you can go and purchase the app for $6.99. It's a one-time purchase, and that's actually going to help me with the funds because I'm looking to expand the app for it to be more interface friendly, more user friendly, have some different functions and features. So right now, it's like I said, it's beta basic, but it'll give you everything you need to start learning astrology right now and start applying these aspects to your life. But it's the language, you know, it's you got to learn the symbols, you got to learn the meaning. So it's a little bit of study, but it's worth it if astrology interests you, for sure.
Okay, and thank you. So that gets into my next question. I was going to say if you can describe all the ways people can reach out and connect with you. So you have the website and YouTube, and so just so you know, all the links and whatnot will be readable, clickable in the show, so people can just hop, skip right over there. So again, thank you so much for that. I'm obviously going to avail myself of that. I want to continue to learn from you, and so I guess as we wrap up here, this has been a beyond phenomenal conversation. Do you want to leave us with any last word or final send off?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for inviting me into this conversation, Luke. When Catriel, shared this experience and said he had a wonderful conversation with you, and felt like you could really hold space and support, the interviewer or the interviewee. I'm just so grateful for this, be invited into this experience. And I would just say anybody that's listening that is a vibrational match to this type of content or this type of conversation is that, don't quit. Just keep going, even when things feel heavy, even when you face certain things or aspects within yourself. It's actually for you. It's there to bring you more fully into yourself. So, just do what's in front of you to do at the best of your ability. Be present with all the energies, even if you don't like it. Learn to love the situation you're in, even if you don't like it, because it really is, life is happening for us if we choose to see it that way. So this is really an invitation to be more your authentic self, but first of all and foremost with yourself, and then come from that space and share from that space, and you're going to really have a life around you that thrives, that you feel happier in because you get to be yourself, which I think is the foundation from all the thousands of people I've met in my careers. That's all anybody wants to be, is just to be accepted for being themselves, whatever that is. We all want that as our core. And so, but it's a journey. It's a journey. And so just know you're not on the journey alone. There's a lot of us doing it. And we're more connected and we have more in common than we are separate, is what I would leave you with from my experience.
Thank you so much for that. So beautifully stated, eloquent and profound. And you've been a beyond amazing guest. I would love to have you back on at some point in the future, of
Oh, that'd be
course. And
great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
you got it. And again, I want to thank you for being a great guest. I want to thank the audience for listening all the way to the end. I'm going to be seeing you guys in the next episode. Everyone, take care. Have a great day and a great year. Bye bye.
Thank you, Luke. Bye-bye.